The letter had been sealed in a filing cabinet for over a decade, waiting for me to finally open the right drawer. When my fingers pulled back that rusted tab on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I wasn't looking for a family secret. I was just doing my job. But the moment my eyes scanned the embossed notary stamp at the bottom of the parchment, the floor beneath my desk seemed to give way. The story I had been told about my life, the narrative that had dictated my self-worth, my guilt, and my debt for 25 years, was a complete lie. Before we get into this, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you are right now. Now, let me take you back to the summer of 2001 in the small town of Oak Ridge, Vermont, to a porch smelling of wet pine, and the day my entire world collapsed. My name is Sophia. I am 32 years old, and by profession, I am an archivist for the County Historical Society. I spend my days cataloging deeds, land grants, birth certificates, and estate records. I deal in hard, undeniable facts preserved on paper. But growing up, the only version of history I was allowed to believe was the one dictated by my Aunt Evelyn. I was 7 years old when my parents were killed in a highway collision during an early autumn thunderstorm. In an instant, I became an orphan in a quiet town where everybody knew everybody else's business. My parents, David and Clara, had been modest, hard-working people. My father ran a small cabinet workshop, and my mother worked at the local library. We didn't live in luxury, but our home was full of warmth, books, and sawdust. When they died, the town held its breath to see where 7-year-old Sophia would land. That was when my mother's older sister, Aunt Evelyn, stepped onto the public stage. Evelyn was 40 at the time, unmarried, impeccably dressed, and intensely focused on local social standing. She sat on the church committee, organized the annual Apple Blossom Festival, and possessed a voice that could command a room without ever rising above a conversational tone. To the people of Oak Ridge, Evelyn was a pillar of civic virtue. The day after the funeral, Evelyn gathered the neighbors on our front lawn. I remember standing in the hallway behind the screen door, clutching my mother's old wool sweater, watching through the mesh. "I am taking Sophia in," Evelyn announced to the crowd, her voice dripping with solemn tragedy. "It will be a heavy cross to bear. A single woman sacrificing her youth and her savings to raise a traumatized child. But family is duty, and I will not let David and Clara's girl be thrown to the state." The neighbors wiped tears from their eyes. Mrs. Higgins from next door brought a casserole. The town council commended her bravery. From that single afternoon, the legend of Aunt Evelyn's saintly sacrifice was born. There was only one problem with her grand performance. Another person lived in our family house. My great-uncle Thomas. Thomas was my father's older brother. He was a quiet, stoic man in his late 50s who lived in the small stone garden cottage at the rear of our 2-acre property. Thomas was a retired civil engineer who wore faded flannel shirts, smelled like pipe tobacco and cedar, and rarely spoke at town meetings. While Evelyn held court in the main house, Thomas spent his days in his workshop, fixing vintage clocks, tending to the apple orchard, and reading thick historical volumes. To the town, Thomas was an eccentric recluse, a freeloader whom Evelyn generously allowed to reside in the garden cottage out of pity. Evelyn made sure everyone believed that narrative, too. "Poor Thomas," she would tell the ladies at her bridge club while I served them tea. "He has nowhere else to go. I feed him, give him a roof over his head, and ask for nothing in return. Between taking care of an ungrateful orphan and a broken old man, my hands are completely tied." For 25 years, that was the air I breathed. Growing up under Evelyn's roof wasn't abuse in the physical sense. It was a slow, calculated erosion of my identity. Evelyn reminded me daily of my debt to her. Every plate of food, every pair of shoes, every school field trip form came with a speech. "Do you know what I gave up for you, Sophia?" she would say, inspecting my bedroom for dust with white-gloved fingers. "I could have moved to Boston. I could have married. Instead, I stayed in this drafty house, spending my hard-earned money to keep you clothed and fed. You owe me your very life." When I excelled in school, Evelyn claimed the credit. When I won the regional history essay contest at 14, she stood beside me for the town newspaper photo, holding the plaque while I stood behind her. "It's all about discipline at home," she told the reporter. "I make sure she studies 3 hours every night." When I was sick, she complained about the cost of medicine. When I wanted to apply to college, she scoffed. "A state school is all I can stretch my budget for, Sophia. Don't be greedy. You should be working to pay me back." And through all those years, there was Uncle Thomas. Thomas never argued with Evelyn. When she barked orders at him or belittled him in front of guests, he simply bowed his head, picked up his toolbox, and walked back to his cottage. But when Evelyn was at her committee meetings, Thomas was there for me. It was Thomas who sat with me at the kitchen counter at 6 in the morning, quietly helping me with my algebra homework. It was Thomas who noticed when my winter boots were leaking and bought me a brand new waterproof pair with cash he pulled from a worn leather wallet. It was Thomas who paid for my SAT prep courses, handing me an envelope of money with a soft wink. "A little scholarship from an old man who believes in you, Soph," he'd say. "Don't tell your aunt. It'll just set her off." When I left for college at 18, Evelyn handed me a spreadsheet. It was a handwritten ledger listing $22,000 in accumulated child-rearing expenses: food, electricity, clothing, and school supplies. "You will start making monthly payments to me the day you graduate," Evelyn said, tapping her long red fingernail against the paper. "It is only fair." I cried in my dorm room that first night, carrying the crushing weight of a debt I felt I could never repay. I worked 2 part-time jobs at the university library, sending Evelyn $200 every single month from my meager wages, just to keep her from calling my dean to complain about my filial disrespect. Uncle Thomas passed away 5 years ago, during my second year working as a professional archivist. He died peacefully in his sleep in his garden cottage, surrounded by his books and his ticking clocks. I was heartbroken. Evelyn, on the other hand, was furious, not because she missed him, but because Thomas had left no formal will in his cottage. "The old fool died without a dime," Evelyn complained at his wake, sipping white wine while townspeople offered their condolences. "Left me with the cleanup. I had to pay for his casket out of my own pocket." On his deathbed at the local hospice, 3 days before he passed, Thomas had pulled me close. His hand was thin, his skin dry as paper. He looked into my eyes with an intensity that startled me. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice raspy, "when the time is right, when you feel the weight is too heavy, look in the county repository. The old oak filing cabinet in the basement annex. Drawer 4. The truth doesn't rot, child. It just waits." At the time, I thought he was delirious from the morphine. I thought he was talking about old family photographs or historical land maps he had cataloged during his engineering career. I kissed his forehead, held his hand, and buried him beside my parents. 5 years passed. I turned 32. I lived in a small rented apartment near the Historical Society, still paying Evelyn $300 a month toward my debt, which she claimed had accrued interest. Then came January of this year. Evelyn announced to the local paper that she was celebrating her 65th birthday by holding a grand gala at the Oak Ridge Cultural Center. She invited the mayor, the town council, the local business owners, and 3 regional reporters. The theme of the gala: a lifetime of service, honoring Evelyn Vance. 2 weeks before the event, Evelyn called me into the main house. She was sitting at the mahogany dining table, surrounded by glossy event invitations and catering menus. "Sophia," she said, not even looking up as I walked in, "I have hired a legal consultant to draft a formal agreement. I am selling this house and the 2 acres to a commercial developer for $900,000. I froze. Selling the house, Mom and Dad's house. "My house," Evelyn corrected sharply, raising her chin. "I have maintained this money pit for 25 years. And since you still owe me $14,000 on your child-rearing ledger, I am requiring you to sign a contract waiving any future claim to family heirlooms or property proceeds. Furthermore, you will deliver the keynote toast at my gala, publicly thanking me for saving you from state custody." She slid 2 documents across the table. One was a draft of the property sale contract. The other was a typed script for my speech at her gala. "If you refuse," Evelyn said, her voice dropping into that icy, calculated tone, "I will publish your debt ledger in the town gazette. Everyone in Oak Ridge will know that the girl I saved turned out to be a selfish, ungrateful leech who refused to support the aunt who starved herself to feed her." I stood there in the dining room of my childhood home, feeling the walls closing in. The shame, the decades of conditioning, the psychological trap she had built around me felt unbreakable. I took the papers, walked out without a word, and drove straight to my office at the County Historical Society. It was raining heavily that afternoon. The basement archives of the county repository were quiet, smelling of old paper, leather, and damp stone. I sat at my desk, staring at the script Evelyn had written for me. "Tonight, I stand before you to honor the woman who sacrificed everything so I could have a future." My stomach turned. I pushed my chair back, walked down the long, narrow aisle of metal shelving, and headed toward the dusty basement annex, the section where pre-2005 probate and court records were kept in cold storage. I hadn't been to the back corner of the annex in years, but as I walked past the row of gray steel cabinets, I saw it sitting in the shadow of a steam pipe, an old, dark oak filing cabinet with brass handles. Uncle Thomas's words from 5 years ago echoed in the quiet basement. "Drawer 4, the truth doesn't rot, child, it just waits." My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I pulled a master key ring from my belt, found the brass skeleton key for the historical probate cabinets, and inserted it into the lock of drawer 4. The lock clicked. The drawer groaned as I pulled it open, releasing a cloud of dried dust. Inside were hundreds of manila folders, color-coded by year and case number. I flipped through the tabs until my fingers hit a thick, black leather-bound binder with an embossed gold seal. In RE, Estate and Guardianship of SOPHIAVANCE, Juvenile Case 2001-884. My hands were shaking so violently, I almost dropped the binder onto the concrete floor. I brought it to my desk under the bright fluorescent desk lamp, opened the heavy leather cover, and began to read. The first document was a certified decree from the Vermont Family Court, dated October 14, 2001, 2 months after my parents died. "It is hereby ordered that Thomas ANDREWVANCE is appointed sole legal guardian of the minor child, SOPHIAVANCE." I gasped, pressing my palm over my mouth. Sole legal guardian, not Evelyn, Thomas. I turned the page. Attached was a second document, the probate accounting for my parents' estate. My father and mother had not died penniless. They had a comprehensive family trust and 2 commercial life insurance policies totaling $1.8 million. Under the court-mandated terms of the trust, the funds were placed under the strict, sole trusteeship of Thomas Vance. The money was designated specifically for my upbringing, medical care, private tutoring, college fund, and living expenses. And then came the financial ledger, a meticulous 40-page accounting ledger kept in Thomas's neat, engineering handwriting, complete with attached bank statements, canceled checks, and court receipts. I read line by line, my eyes burning with tears. Every single month from October 2001 until October 2018, Uncle Thomas had written a certified bank check out of my trust fund to EVELYN Vance ***. The amount, $3,500 per month. The memo line on every single check read, "Stipend for housing and domestic care of Sophia Vance, per trustee agreement." Evelyn hadn't spent a single dime of her own money on me. She had been paid $42,000 a year tax-free out of my parents' life insurance trust just to let me sleep in my own parents' house. Over 17 years, Evelyn had collected over $700,000 from my father's memory. But the revelations didn't stop there. I turned to the property records section at the back of the binder. In November 2001, to prevent Evelyn from trying to sell the family house or force a partition, Uncle Thomas had used his own life savings, $160,000, to purchase the house and the 2 acres directly from my parents' probate estate. The deed was transferred into a separate land trust, the SOPHIA-VANCE Heritage Trust. According to the deed recorded with the state, great-uncle Thomas was the grantor, and I was the sole named beneficiary. A temporary lease agreement attached to the file allowed Evelyn Vance to reside in the main house as a tenant at will, provided she maintained the property and cared for me, with her tenancy automatically terminating upon Thomas's death or my 32nd birthday. Evelyn didn't own the house. She had never owned the house. She was a glorified tenant who had been living rent-free while collecting a massive monthly salary from my dead parents' estate. And then I found the last document in the folder. A handwritten letter from Uncle Thomas, dated 6 months before he passed away, addressed to the county probate judge and attached to a sealed copy of his final will. To whoever opens this file when Sophia is ready, *. I knew my sister Evelyn's nature. I knew that if I confronted her while Sophia was a child, she would throw a legal war that would tear the little girl's life apart. I chose to stay in the background, paying Evelyn her price to keep peace over Sophia's head, while ensuring every dollar was tracked and protected. Sophia's college is fully paid through a separate account at First National Bank, $140,000 remaining. The house belongs entirely to Sophia. Upon my death, Evelyn has no legal claim to any brick, tree, or dollar associated with this estate. Evelyn has lied to this town, to my family, and to my girl. I leave the truth here, preserved under official seal, so that when Sophia stands on her own feet, she can reclaim her name without fear. Signed, Thomas A. Vance. I sat at my desk in the silent archive room for a long time. The clock on the wall ticked in the steady, rhythmic cadence of Uncle Thomas's workshop. I didn't cry anymore. The grief, the confusion, and the years of self-doubt evaporated, replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. Evelyn thought she was playing a game of intimidation against a frightened orphan. She didn't realize she was dealing with a professional archivist who now possessed 30 pages of certified court evidence. Now, I need to pause here for a second. If you've ever been in a situation where a toxic relative tried to rewrite history, where someone stole credit for your hard work or made you feel worthless, drop a fire emoji in the comments. And if you think Evelyn is about to get what she deserves, type justice. Let's keep going, because what happened at that gala was something the town of Oak Ridge still talks about. The night of Evelyn's 65th birthday gala arrived on a crisp Saturday in February. The Oak Ridge Cultural Center was packed. Over 150 people filled the banquet hall, local business owners, church members, the mayor, the chief of police, and reporters from the County Gazette. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, catered champagne, and a massive velvet banner hanging above the stage. CELEBRATNGEVELYNVANCE, a lifetime of selfless sacrifice. Evelyn wore an emerald green silk gown, her hair perfectly styled, holding court at the central table. She accepted flowers, cards, and glowing praise from everyone who approached. I arrived 30 minutes late. I wore a tailored black suit, carrying a leather briefcase under my arm. When Evelyn saw me walk in, her eyes narrowed slightly, but she quickly put on her practiced, saintly smile for the surrounding crowd. "Ah, there she is," Evelyn said loudly, pulling me toward the front table where Mayor Henderson was sitting. "My niece, Sophia, the girl I poured my life into. Sophia, darling, did you bring the toast script I gave you?" "I brought something much better, Aunt Evelyn," I said smoothly, keeping my voice perfectly calm. "I brought the complete history." Mayor Henderson smiled warmly. "We can't wait to hear it, Sophia. Your aunt is a treasure to this community." "She is certainly unique, Mr. Mayor," I replied. At 8 o'clock, the master of ceremonies took the stage and tapped his glass. The room quieted down. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, "we will now hear from Sophia Vance, who owes her upbringing to our guest of honor. Sophia, please take the podium." The room erupted in applause. Evelyn sat back in her chair, folding her hands over her lap, looking up at the stage with a condescending, expectant grin. She was waiting for her public tribute. She was waiting for me to bow my head in front of the entire town. I walked up the wooden steps to the stage, adjusted the microphone, and set my leather briefcase on the podium. I looked out at the sea of faces, people who had watched me grow up, people who had bought into Evelyn's narrative for 25 years. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice carrying clear and steady through the sound system. "Tonight, we are gathered to talk about sacrifice, duty, and the story of how I was raised." A few people cheered. Evelyn smiled broadly, nodding to the mayor. "For 25 years," I continued, "this town has heard a single story. You were told that when my parents died in 2001, Aunt Evelyn sacrificed her youth, her finances, and her freedom to take in a helpless orphan out of pure Christian charity." I paused, looking directly at Evelyn. Her smile faltered just a fraction. "You were told that my great-uncle Thomas was a freeloading hermit who lived off Evelyn's generosity in the garden cottage," I said. "And you were told that I owe Evelyn Vance tens of thousands of dollars for the food, shelter, and care she provided me." The room was completely silent now. The mayor frowned slightly, sensing a shift in the air. Evelyn's posture stiffened. "I am an archivist," I said, opening my briefcase and pulling out a stack of sleek, laminated documents. "My job is to separate myth from documentation. And 3 days ago, in the county probate archives, I found the official, certified court records of the Vance estate." Evelyn stood up from her chair, so fast her wine glass tipped over, splashing red wine across the white tablecloth. "Sophia, that is enough," Evelyn barked, her voice dropping the saintly facade and flashing with pure rage. "You are embarrassing yourself. Get off that stage right now." "Sit down, Evelyn," Mayor Henderson said quietly, staring at her in shock. I didn't lose my temper. I didn't raise my voice. I simply turned on the slide projector behind the podium, a setup I had arranged with the audio-visual technician before the event began. A massive, high-definition image flashed onto the 40-foot screen behind me. It was a scanned copy of Vermont Family Court, Decree 2001-884. "Document number 1, I read clearly into the microphone. "October 14, 2001. The Vermont Family Court appointed my great-uncle Thomas Vance as my sole legal guardian. Evelyn Vance was never my legal guardian." Gasps echoed through the banquet hall. People leaned forward in their chairs. I clicked the remote. A second document appeared on the screen. A bank statement showing a monthly transfer of $3,500. "Document number 2, I said. "My parents left a $1.8 million insurance trust. From October 2001 to October 2018, Uncle Thomas paid Evelyn Vance $42,000 a year out of my trust fund to cover my room and board. Over 17 years, Evelyn collected $714,000 tax-free." The room went dead quiet. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Evelyn's face turned from pale white to a deep mottled purple. "She's lying. Those are forged." "These are certified copies bearing the seal of the Vermont State Probate Court, signed by Judge Richard Vance," I replied calmly. I clicked the remote again. The deed to the family home appeared on the screen. "Document number 3, I said. "In November 2001, Uncle Thomas purchased our family house using his own savings and placed it into the Sophia Vance Heritage Trust. Evelyn Vance never owned a single brick of that property. She has been a tenant at will for 25 years, a tenant whose lease explicitly expired upon my 32nd birthday." I looked down at Evelyn, who was standing in the center of the hall, completely isolated as the people at her table moved their chairs back from her. "Aunt Evelyn," I said, my voice echoing through the speakers, "you did not sacrifice for me. You were paid nearly $750,000 to be my caretaker, while you emotionally abused me, publicly humiliated me, and demanded I pay you back for expenses my dead parents already covered." I pulled a legal manila envelope from my briefcase. "Standing at the back of this hall tonight is Deputy Sheriff Miller," I said, pointing toward the double doors. "He is holding 2 court documents. The first is a formal 30-day notice to vacate my property, served to you as of tonight. The second is a civil summons from the County Superior Court for a full financial audit of the funds you misappropriated from my trust. Evelyn looked toward the back of the room. Deputy Miller, an old friend of Uncle Thomas, stood by the entrance in full uniform, holding the white legal envelope. Evelyn looked around the banquet hall. 150 of her peers, her church members, her social circle, and the local press were staring at her with expressions of utter disgust and disbelief. The Saint of Oak Ridge had been stripped naked under the glare of her own spotlight. You ungrateful little monster," Evelyn shrieked, her voice cracking as she grabbed her purse and stumbled away from the table. "After everything I did for you." "You didn't do it for me, Evelyn," I said softly into the microphone. "You did it for yourself, and the story ends tonight." Evelyn ran out of the banquet hall, tears smearing her makeup, as Deputy Miller stepped into the hallway to hand her the legal summons. The banquet hall remained silent for 3 long seconds. Then, near the middle row, Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor who had brought a casserole 25 years ago, stood up and began to clap. Then Mayor Henderson stood. Within 10 seconds, the entire room was on its feet, giving a standing ovation, not for Evelyn, but for the truth. 2 months have passed since that night. Evelyn didn't fight the civil suit. Her legal team took one look at Uncle Thomas's meticulously kept books and advised her to settle immediately. To avoid criminal fraud charges for the unauthorized interest demands she made on me, Evelyn surrendered her personal bank accounts and signed over her vehicle to satisfy the financial judgment. She moved out of Oak Ridge 3 weeks ago, relocated to a small rented apartment 2 counties over, disgraced and completely ignored by the community she once tried to rule. As for me, I moved back into my parents' home, my home. I renovated Uncle Thomas's garden cottage, turning it into a quiet retreat where I keep his old clocks ticking and his engineering books preserved on polished wooden shelves. The main house is warm again, filled with light, music, and the smell of cedar. Every Saturday afternoon, I walk through the apple orchard behind the cottage, holding a cup of tea, listening to the birds in the pine trees. I used to think that survival meant keeping your head down, enduring the lies, and carrying the debts that other people forced onto your shoulders. But I learned that the truth isn't just a passive fact sitting in a dusty drawer. The truth is a foundation. It waits patiently until you are brave enough to dig for it, pull it into the light, and use it to build a life on your own terms. My name is Sophia. I am 32 years old, and for the first time in my life, I don't owe anyone a single thing. Subscribe to my channel.